I have to confess a deep fascination with conspiracy theories. They're a fun way to pass time when you're struggling with insomnia. So let's begin tonight by playing a game that I call Conspiracy Theory Bingo. Let's see how many of these that you recognise. First of all, there's the Roswell Incident. Some suggest it wasn't a top secret weather balloon that crashed in New Mexico. Rather, it was a UFO. It was taken away to Area 51 to be reverse engineered, leading to the subsequent computer revolution. Or what about the moon landings? Some suggest that we never actually landed on the moon in the 1960s. Instead, it was all a hoax done inside of a film studio in order for the Americans to beat the Soviets in the Cold War space race. Then there's the September 11th terrorist attacks. Some suggest that it wasn't actually an attack by Islamic terrorists. Rather, it was a government inside job, using remote-controlled planes, missiles, demolition charges inside the buildings to bring them down. All to justify conquest in the Middle East to steal the oil. Then more recently, there's the QAnon conspiracy. Some suggest that the US government is really controlled by the deep state, a group of satanic worshipping paedophiles allied with media and industry. But Donald Trump was going to stop them. That was until they stole the election from him. How about this one? The COVID pandemic. Some suggest it's actually a genetically engineered virus, a weapon spread using 5G technology, all part of a plan by the World Health Organization and the World Economic Forum to bring about the Great Reset, bankrupting nations, restricting personal liberties, imposing universal socialism. And then there's the COVID vaccine too. Some suggest it's not medicine, but actually it's designed to reduce human fertility or to modify our DNA, or it's all part of a plot by Bill Gates to inject us with microchips to track us and control us, or at the very least, make us want to buy more Microsoft products. Well, what was your bingo score? How many of those 6 conspiracy theories did you recognise? Although some of these conspiracies can be a bit of harmless fun, others can be dangerous. They don't just stay as theories in an online world, but they can have real-world implications and impacts. For example, look back to the insurrection in Washington, D.C., the attack on the Capitol Hill back in January. They sought to prevent the peaceful transfer of power after months of lies about the outcome of the election. Or, for example, take the misinformation about the COVID vaccine, which is causing people in our country and all around the world to doubt its safety, to refuse to go and receive it. These conspiracy theories can have significant real-world impacts. But what I want us to explore together tonight is, why are so many people in our society buying into these conspiratorial and mythical ways of thinking about the world? Part of the answer is psychological in nature. Conspiracy theories reflect our innate ability as human beings to find patterns. They express our desire to make sense of our experiences in a complex world. We all want to know why things happen. We want to find meaning behind the seemingly random and unrelated events that dominate the world stage. The problem is that we're bombarded with so much information these days on a global scale that it's absolutely overwhelming. It's completely impossible to make sense of it all. And so it can be comforting to fall back on these grand conspiracy theories as a way of joining up the dots, a way of making sense of a world that otherwise seems senseless. Theologian Mark Meynell has also reflected on 2 further factors that have led to the rise of conspiracy theories in our society. The first factor he identifies is the loss of trust in authorities. We're a generation that have lived through, in recent memory, the financial crash, the political expenses scandal, the newspaper phone hacking scandal, the WikiLeaks exposure of government surveillance, the spread of fake news by social media algorithms, and many other such things. All of these things have cumulatively led to a loss of trust in the institutions that once were trusted to govern us, to inform us. There's this loss of trust in authorities and institutions. Closely related to that is the second factor, which is the rise of individual skepticism. Although we struggle to trust those in authority over us, we have invested ourselves with newfound trust. We have set ourselves up as the authorities of our own experience and interpretations of the world. And the roots of this way of thinking, this individualism, it goes back centuries to the Enlightenment. The Enlightenment invested newfound confidence in human minds and their ability to make sense of the world in which we live. The Enlightenment promoted skepticism about all truth claims, all traditional authorities, especially spiritual claims and religious institutions. It tried to see through everything until it could find something that it couldn't see through, something that it couldn't doubt. But the problem with this kind of radical skepticism is that it's like a universal acid. It burns through everything it touches. And now, 2 centuries on into the Enlightenment experiment, we have lost the things that once helped us make sense of this world and find meaning for our lives in it. It's this meaning crisis that has allowed conspiracy theories to blossom and flourish in our society today. They replace the religious stories that we have lost. They bring a sense of meaning and coherence to our lives that otherwise is lacking. In fact, some of these conspiracy theories are religiously shaped. For example, cultural commentator Mark Sayers suggests that the QAnon movement is really a new false religion. It's centered on a messianic figure with secret knowledge that's available to the elect and who has promised to destroy the wicked on Judgment Day. Ironically, although people who believe in conspiracy theories often are very skeptical, they have invested great amounts of faith in these myths, that there is someone or something behind the curtain with a grand plan orchestrating events on the global stage. And all of these things point to our culture being in the midst of a crisis of meaninglessness. Western secular society has discovered the hard way that a world without God is a world emptied of ultimate meaning and purpose. Our scientists tell us that we're just blobs of carbon floating from one meaningless existence to another. We're no longer adventurers on a great quest, but castaways adrift on the seas of nihilism. We're no longer pilgrims on the road to a destination, but wanderers and tourists on a never-ending journey. We're still avid consumers of stories, but we've stopped believing that there's a divine author who brings meaning and significance to the individual stories of our lives. And so instead we have to invent our own stories, or we have to embrace these grand conspiracy theories instead. Here tonight I want to suggest to you that there is a better way. The Bible tells the better story that's not only the answer to our individual and societal crisis of meaning, but it also fulfills the desires of our hearts, because it is the true story of things that really happened in human history to Jesus and for us. The resurrection of Jesus Christ from the dead on Easter Sunday, 40 days later his ascension to the throne in heaven, answers tonight's question: who's really in charge behind the scenes of world history? And the good news is that it's not the Illuminati, it's not the Bilderberg Group, it's not the United Nations, it's not even David Icke's lizard people. It's the living Lord Jesus Christ. Nevertheless, the realization that there really is a God who rules the world, who is guiding history towards its destiny, it's not always received as good news by people. For example, the atheist philosopher Professor Thomas Nagel speaks for many people when he says, "It isn't just that I don't believe in God and naturally hope that I'm right in my belief. It's that I hope there is no God. I don't want there to be a God. I don't want the universe to be like that." In the back of Nagel's mind seems to be the generic idea of God as some kind of cosmic dictator or divine policeman or big brother figure, a God whose main characteristic is power and who uses his power to control and enslave the human race. Another anti-theist, Christopher Hitchens, once explained the reasons for his atheism like this: "I think it would be rather awful if it was true, if there was a permanent, total, round-the-clock divine supervision and invigilation of everything you did. You would never have a waking or sleeping moment when you weren't being watched or controlled and supervised by some celestial entity from the moment of your conception to the moment of your death. It would be like living in North Korea." These are very real concerns that people have about God. However, Jesus reassures us in the midst of these concerns by revealing to us the true face and the true heart of the living God. Jesus is the God whose power is guided by his love to serve and to bless his people, rather than to enslave and demand from them. That's why in the days leading up to the first Easter that Jesus is recorded as saying in Mark chapter 10, "For even the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve and give his life as a ransom for many." The background to this saying from Jesus is his followers have been arguing among themselves, competing for positions of honour and authority in Jesus' forthcoming kingdom. Two brothers, James and John, had made the bold move of approaching Jesus to ask at his left and his right hands when he sits on his throne in power and glory. Upon learning about this, the other disciples begin to complain and criticize the two brothers. It's not that James and John were different, wanting something that the others didn't. It's just that they were annoyed that James and John shamelessly admitted what they wanted and reached out to grasp it before the others got hold of it. Before we climb atop our high horses and sit in judgment of the disciples, let's remember that we're human like them, that we face the very same temptations of seeking glory and honour and power for ourselves. If you don't believe me that you face that real temptation, then just look at your social media profile and look at how you present yourself to the world. But Jesus sees this event as a teachable moment, when he can both reveal something to his disciples about himself, but also God's design for exercising leadership and authority. Jesus teaches them, "You know that those who are regarded as rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them, and their high officials exercise authority over them. Not so with you. Instead, whoever wants to become great among you must be your servant, and whoever wants to be first must be slave of all." Here Jesus is contrasting God's way of ruling with the way the pagan rulers rule. Just imagine and think about the dictatorial Caesars of Rome, the pharaohs of Egypt. Think about the elites of our own time. They parade their pomp. They display their power for all to see. They enjoy controlling the details of people's lives, compelling people to submit to their will. They lord their position and authority over others. But Jesus defiantly says that it should not be so for those who follow him. Instead, Jesus says that his followers are to follow his model and his example of leadership. While the Caesars demand to be served by slaves, instead, Christ descends to become a slave and to serve others. That's why he says, "The Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve and give his life as a ransom for many." In taking to himself the title, the Son of Man, Jesus is referencing a vision in the Old Testament of a mysterious figure who is both human and divine. The Son of Man is displayed approaching God's throne in heaven and is granted an eternal kingdom and power and glory. And this is a vision of the enthronement ceremony for the King of God's kingdom. And here in Mark chapter 10, Jesus is identifying himself as that prophesied King of Kings and Lord of Lords. However, Jesus is reassuring us also that from that position of supreme power and authority over this world and history, we do not have to hide, we do not have to fear, because Jesus is the King who uses his power to serve and bless his people, not to exploit and oppress them. Later on in the Gospel accounts, on the night before Jesus' death on the cross, Jesus dramatically enacts these words. He washes the feet of his disciples. He takes on the place of the lowest slave, who had the smelly and dirty job of cleaning guests' feet after they were turned in from the streets coated in dirt and excrement. Again, on this occasion, the disciples have been competing among themselves for the highest places of honour. None of them would descend to the lowest place and serve the others by washing their feet in this necessary way. And so Jesus does it instead. Jesus takes the lowest place. And afterwards he explains to them why he did this. "If I then, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you also ought to wash one another's feet. For I have given you an example, that you also should do just as I have done to you. A servant is not greater than his master." In washing his disciples' feet, Jesus is not just demonstrating what servant leadership looks like. It's not glamorous. It's messy. But Jesus is also previewing and explaining to his disciples the meaning of the events that are about to unfold the next day, which was Good Friday, when Jesus was going to die to wash us clean from the stains of sin and evil in our lives. The cross of Jesus shows us the God who did not use his ultimate power to serve and protect himself, but instead made himself vulnerable and laid down his life to serve and save his people from the oppressive power of evil in this world. This also reassures us about the significance of what happened next, when Jesus rose again from the dead on Easter Sunday, and 40 days later ascended to heaven and was crowned as King of Kings and Lord of Lords. This reassures us that the Lord Jesus is the supreme authority whom we can trust, who loves us and has our best interests in mind. If you ever doubt that as you survey the wreckage of this world in rebellion against God and his kingdom, or as you look at the circumstances of your life, then you just need to look back to the cross to see the reality of Jesus' servant-hearted love for you and all that he would do to save you. Well, tonight we've been thinking about the crisis of meaning in our culture and our fascination with conspiracy theories. Although I've dismissed many of these theories out of hand, perhaps even one or two that you're favourable towards, well, let me just say that even if I'm wrong, even if any of these conspiracy theories turn out to be true, that doesn't change the fact that the story they tell is not the story that ultimately defines the meaning of our lives or that determines our destiny. Instead, the resurrection of Jesus Christ from the dead declares that the power of death has been overthrown, that with it the greatest power of every dictator in this world to instill fear in their people has been taken out of their hands. Jesus reigns, death is defeated, his love and his life has conquered death and evil, and one day soon his kingdom is going to come on the earth, bringing heaven down on earth, causing all the bad and all the sad things to become untrue. This is the better story that defines your life and my life if you're trusting in Jesus. But maybe tonight you're here and you're listening and you've not yet put your trust in Jesus. You haven't yet asked him to be your God and to be your Saviour. But the good news is that you can start tonight, this Easter Sunday night. You can give him the keys of your life. You can make his better story your story. You can place your hope in sharing his destiny rather than having to be the author of your own destiny. And so that's why Jesus offers the better story than the stories told by conspiracy theories. Hope you'll stick on with us this evening for a little bit longer and you'll submit some questions. Go to www.slido.com. Use our event reference number, which is 223800, 223800. Submit your questions. See questions that other people have submitted and vote on them, and we'll have a go at answering them now.